The college football playoffs are almost here in terms of the final rankings. We've got just a couple more weeks. And this weekend was an opportunity for a lot of teams to basically make their case. We're headed into rivalry week. There's about 8 teams that have a chance to make the playoffs. 3 or 4 of them, quite frankly, look to be the front runners. But a few of them play each other. And there are other rivalry games that are important. Oklahoma State in particular. I'll get to that in just a moment. But before I do, got to give credit to the Buckeyes. They came out and absolutely shellacked Michigan State. The Spartans never had a chance. That game was over before you could say hello. 32 of 35. That's CJ Stroud. I mean, that's insane. 6 touchdowns early in the third quarter, and he didn't play anymore. That's fantastic football. So hats off to the Buckeyes. They deserve to play a game against Michigan where they get all this attention, and they're going to. They earned it. That's as simple as it gets. So I think that Ohio State should now be ranked number 2 ahead of Alabama. I'll get into that in just a moment as well. But a couple of other notes about Ohio State. This is a team that has 5-star receivers that don't even start. They're the deepest team at receiver I can remember. And guys like Garrett Wilson, while they're fantastic, if he was injured further, they could still be okay. That's just not normal to take away a future NFL receiver. So to me, the escalation of Ohio State's offense, all of a sudden they've kind of gotten in sync after an earlier season loss to Oregon. Ironic, because the Ducks were absolutely crushed last night in a game at Utah. They were down 28-0 at halftime. It wasn't a whole lot different than what Ohio State did to Michigan State yesterday. And now Oregon's just completely out of it. With that said, Ohio State, their defense showed up too. That's really important. Their defense had been lackluster. Even their fan base, who is as rabid and as narrow-minded as it gets, they knew they needed to improve if they were going to play against Georgia or anybody else and win. And yesterday was a chance for them to show that they could play better. Peyton Thorne didn't throw well, but he didn't have a lot of places to throw. And in really a situation where Ohio State could have just kind of let off the gas, they just kept hammering them. They only gave up 7 points in the game, and at the end, it doesn't really matter. Ohio State could have named their score. They just destroyed them, but defensively is one of the reasons the Ohio State offense did well. They kept getting the ball back. So good for Ohio State overall. It's good to see a team with that much talent kind of taking it to another level later in the season. They've gotten better, which is what you would have hoped for. Now, Alabama, they got by Arkansas, and they were ahead the whole game, but they never dominated. I don't know if they're bored, if there are issues schematically, coaching, players not understanding things, but to say that Alabama is even close to maximizing what they can do on defense is a joke. They have a ton of talent. Now, I'm sure they've got guys banged up. It's SEC football. It's by far the best league in the country. That being stated, there's no reason for Alabama to give up as many points as they did. They came out on top 42-35 against the Hogs. Now, Arkansas is a pretty darn good football team, and they are one of, as I've talked about this number of times on my site, Inside the Nights, covering UCF. Arkansas and some other SEC games, I'll preview them because I'm fascinated with it. But Arkansas, they maximize their talent. CJ Jefferson at quarterback, really good football player, but he doesn't have the weapons around him overall that some other teams do. Alabama obviously being one. I mean, that's kind of self-explanatory. Bryce Young, he went nuts yesterday, which is what Bryce Young does. But Bryce Young threw for 559 yards, 5 touchdowns, and they barely won. That means the defense is not doing their job. It's that simple. Alabama is now going through what Ohio State did early to mid-season. Their defense is in a funk. Bryce Young throws for 559. You should win by 30 points, period. They won by 7. I don't care if Arkansas scored a late touchdown. I don't care. Minimum, absolute minimum, they should have won by 3 touchdowns. Alabama is not playing well on defense. That's why I think Ohio State should jump them. It's not that Alabama lacks any talent. It is not that Alabama can't be run and pass dominant. They can run the ball a lot too. But for the love of God, 559 yards and 5 touchdowns, and you barely win? What are we doing? What are we doing? Here's the rushing statistics from the game for Alabama. It's not like they didn't try to run the ball, and they did okay at times, but they probably didn't maximize. 36 carries, 112 yards, no rushing touchdowns, though. That's a little concerning. They need to figure it out because when you play Georgia, Arkansas, again, very well coached and all that, but they don't have even anywhere near the talent that Georgia does. There might be 2 or 3 guys on their starting defense that really play in the same rotation that you combine the teams between Arkansas and Georgia. How is Alabama going to do? They're going to beat Auburn next week. Flat out, they're going to beat Auburn. Auburn's not good enough. They're just not. So forget that. I know the Iron Bowl is coming up. It's not going to happen. Why can't you get more yards against Arkansas? Scheme, coaching, and all that aside. 36 carries for 112. It's not terrible, but 3.1 yards per carry probably has Nick Saban saying a lot of things that I'm not going to put on the air. It's not good enough. I think Alabama is now number 3. Again, just my opinion. Obviously, that leads into the 4th spot, and Cincinnati's finally going to get into the playoff. But will they be happy with that spot? Nobody wants to play Georgia in round 1 of the playoffs. Cincinnati can say otherwise publicly, but they'd be fools if they really wanted to play them again. Alabama's coming up against them. Maybe they'll beat them up some. Maybe it'll help. Maybe it won't. I don't know. But there'll at least be some things learned from that for Cincinnati if they end up being the 4 seed and playing against them. But I don't think they're going to be the 4 seed for the following reason. Alabama's going to get beat by Georgia, and they're going to be out of the playoff. Fair or not, that's probably what's going to happen. And then the contention for the 4th spot begins, and that's where the games come into play. Oklahoma State probably impressed me as much as anybody yesterday, and I'm a guy that really likes defense. They shut out Texas Tech. Not a great team, but Oklahoma State's defense next to Georgia is probably the best defense in the country overall because they just don't make errors. They don't give up bad run fit situations where you can take advantage. And even if you're not running the ball well, all of a sudden get a 60-yard touchdown. They don't give those up. They don't give up on trick plays. They don't give up on situations on play action passing. Guys read their keys and they do the right things, which is really weird because historically that's a very poor defense. They don't have enough talent, yada, yada, yada. Gundy has figured it out. His team is doing well. Coach Gundy has done a tremendous job. They're not as explosive as they were when they had Chuba Hubbard at running back. That guy was a dude. He's in the NFL now playing running back. But they have enough talent on offense to compete with anybody. It would actually be very interesting to me to see, maybe not them compete all the way through, but at least compete with Georgia for a half. Their defense is a pain in the butt. Georgia would struggle with them offensively in some regards. I haven't seen enough of them to say like they have corners that can just match up and put 8 in the box. Maybe, maybe not. Again, I'm not an expert on that, but from what I saw yesterday and from looking at the box scores and stuff, they're pretty darn good. Defensively, Oklahoma State puts them in contention. They have the game Bedlam, as they call it, against Oklahoma coming up. They need to not only win that game, they need to win by double digits. Look, the I factor matters and recognition matters. I don't think they beat Oklahoma since like 2011 or something like that. They used to have pretty contested games. Oklahoma just always seems to win that game. So, matter of fact, I'll look it up. But it's unfortunate because Oklahoma State is a team that has a lot of talent. But I just don't think you can really look at them and say, we're going to have more talent than Oklahoma on a consistent basis. They don't recruit as well. They just don't. But what you do in one year based on your chemistry can erase some of that. And if you look at the opportunities that they're going to have this year, that's probably about as good as it's going to get. I can't imagine Oklahoma being more inconsistent than what they've been this year. Even offensively, it's kind of goofy. Lincoln Riley's done a great job there. But the last time that this series was not a victory for Oklahoma was actually 2014. 2011, Oklahoma State won as well, and they dominated 44-10. And then they won on December 6, 2014. They won that game in overtime, 38-35 over Oklahoma. But that also means that there's been 6 games in a row the Sooners have won. That's a lot of credibility that Oklahoma has built up. So it is what it is. Can you win this year? I don't know. It's in Stillwater. You got it at home. You have to find a way to win. And again, they need to win with style points. And here's why. Looking at this, Ohio State's got Michigan coming up. I think Michigan will play them tough for a while, but they're not going to be able to handle Ohio State. I know Donovan Edwards, everybody's excited. That's a Michigan fan about him, the star running back freshman. They got coming in out of Bloomfield, Michigan. He caught 10 passes yesterday, which is weird. He only had 2 catches going into that. Maybe they'll play him some slot dynamic guy. Ohio State just has more of those guys. They just do. Why would I not? I don't care where the game's played. I don't care if they play it in Jim Harbaugh's living room. Ohio State's going to win that game. I don't care about either team. I'm just being blunt. They're better. Barring them turning it over, say, 3 extra times compared to Michigan, which is possible, this game is going to be double-digit victory for Ohio State in Ann Arbor, and that's the end of the story. So, again, I could care less about either team. It's just they're better. But Michigan State would then be in contention for that 4 spot because Georgia would be 1, Ohio State would be 2, Cincinnati, they're not going to lose the championship. At least I don't think. They'll play Houston, a good football team, in the championship game of the American Athletic Conference. They've only lost once. They're 10-1 right now. But I don't think there's any chance they're really going to lose. Their defense is playing well enough. They'll win that game. Houston will give them contention. They're ranked like 24th in the country. Pretty good team. But Cincinnati will be 3rd. Then it comes down to Oklahoma State. It will come down to who else? One other team. And it's as big a cachet as you can get. And I guarantee the networks want it. Notre Dame. Notre Dame plays Stanford this next weekend, who stinks. Stanford they were 3-7 going into this past. It doesn't matter. They're just not very good. Notre Dame plays on the road. It won't matter. Half the stadium will be Notre Dame fans out in Palo Alto. Why? Stanford fans also stink. They don't support their team. They never have. With that being stated, Notre Dame is playing very well. They have dominated here recently on defense. They kind of got things going in the right direction, and their offense has really kind of fixed itself, for lack of a better term. They haven't done a great job throughout the season. The offensive line was a complete travesty early in the year. They've done better. They're getting a body on a body, and they have a phenomenal running back in Kyron Williams. But Notre Dame, just kind of looking at their stats here, they're too up and down for me. If I could pick one and I'd pick State right now, Oklahoma State over them. And Notre Dame doesn't play in a championship game either. Kind of puts them in an odd spot. But Notre Dame is playing well. They just destroyed, and I mean destroyed, Georgia Tech, which you should do. That game was like 38-0 in the middle second quarter or something like that. I mean, it was an annihilation. But they could have done that against Virginia last week, and they didn't put their foot on the gas. Why? I have no idea. Virginia's quarterback didn't play, and anytime Brendan Armstrong doesn't play in a game, it's news. Very good football player. He's going to get paid to play football very soon. So, can they find a way to overcome not playing in the championship game? How does Oklahoma State do? It's really those 2 teams, in my eyes. Maybe there's something else that I'm missing, but I don't think so. Michigan State's out. Oregon's out. I think Alabama's going to lose, and I know there's the argument about, well, Alabama's going to get in if they lose a close game to Georgia. I don't think so. There's no precedent for it, and I'm just going on record. I don't know how you can really project, but I doubt that happens. And maybe if they do, so be it. But they would also be playing a rematch. They would be number 4. They're not going to put them number 3 if they lose to Georgia. That's my opinion. I could be right. But again, if they did that, they'd be with the 2 losses. They'd be number 3, and Cincinnati undefeated would be number 4. That's not going to happen. They don't normally do rematch. There's just no precedent there. I see they're going to do that. And I know SEC fans are going to get mad, and I'm not in the argument for it. I'm just saying this is how I expect it to play out. I'm not saying I agree or disagree. I'm just saying Alabama won't. And that 4 spot's going to come down to Oklahoma State and Notre Dame, assuming both went out. Again, Notre Dame plays Stanford. They're going to crush Stanford. They suck. And Notre Dame, quite frankly, their defense has just played really well recently. In the last 3 games, they've only given up 9 points. That's Georgia numbers there. And I know the competition wasn't great, but 34-6, 28-3, and 55-0 look good on any scale. So they're trending well. Oklahoma State on the other side, they're playing well too. I mean, they just shut out Texas Tech. If you shut out a Power 5 team, I don't care if it's a bottom feeder. Shutouts in this era are very difficult to come by. And that's, again, why I would personally pick, if I had to pick one or the other, and my guesses, if you will, on how the games are going to play out I would take Oklahoma State, but I don't think that's what will happen necessarily unless they dominate. They have to smack Oklahoma, and I don't know if they can do that or not. Rivalry games are weird, man. They are just weird. Oklahoma State is the better team this year. They're at home. But if they get a case of the yips because they get down early, Oklahoma makes a big play. They lost like 6 in a row against them. A lot of those guys, this is like their 5th year, 4th year there, and they've never beat Oklahoma. It matters. They have to play good early. So here are a couple stats for the Oklahoma State fans out there. They're holding teams to 14.9 points a game. In today's era, that's tremendous. Absolutely tremendous. Now, if you look at what they've done in terms of here recently, Oklahoma State is also very interesting from the following perspective. Their run defense, it's always the first thing I look at. Run defense, because if you're good run defense, it really helps your corners out because all the play calling and all the different rules and everything, it favors offense. Defensively, they only gave up 25 yards rushing. Wow, less than a yard per carry to Texas Tech. 26 carries, 25 yards. 133 yards against TCU. But you'd have to go back to the 16th of October, the last time Oklahoma State gave up over 100 yards prior to that. And that was 138 yards rushing at Texas. Obviously, Bijan Robinson and those guys, they got some good athletes there. They've done well. The first couple of games, they were just okay run defense considering who they played. But they've had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 teams they've held under 100 yards. That's tremendous defense. That's the first thing that I look at. Notre Dame, meanwhile, when you compare these teams, it's a little bit different. But I don't think that you can really guess what Notre Dame's going to do because they mix and match their lineups. They pull guys a little earlier than a lot of teams. That's always been Brian Kelly's MO, so it's hard to get a true measurement. They've actually struggled somewhat defensively in terms of the run sometimes because they'll give up yards between the 20s. They have a different philosophy, but you struggle against them in the red zone sometimes. North Carolina, with a tremendous quarterback, took Notre Dame's defense apart not all that long ago, 44-34, and that's kind of the final reason that I would pick Oklahoma State. But that game was still on the 30th of October. As we get towards the end of November here, they've just turned the switch around. The Navy game, I don't count. The only thing they do is run, and they only average 3 yards a carry. Scored 6 points. But again, since the switch went to the month of November, 9 points for the Notre Dame defense. So it's arguable. Everything for me, just my perspective, starts defensively and stopping the run. They only gave up against Georgia Tech 128 yards, and that included like a 50-yard run. There was a bust. Guy missed a tackle in space, and quarterback took off. Other than that, they didn't really do much. Navy's in a situation where, their option football team, again, I don't really care about that. Virginia Tech, 3.4 yards. Southern Cal, 3.9 yards. And they're a passing team, so it's kind of hard to grade. But points, I think that's the best way to look at it for Notre Dame. They've had, in their last 5 games, 4 pretty darn good performances. Southern Cal, Navy, Virginia, Georgia Tech. North Carolina was uncharacteristic, but hey, you got to give Carolina credit too. Quarterback play was good in that game, and they made plays when they could on deep shots, etc. So who do you vote for? Would you put Oklahoma State in? They don't have much history in terms of here recently being in contention. We don't know much about them. Or would you vote for Notre Dame in that scenario? Could be somebody else. Maybe somebody else sneaks in. Would you vote for Alabama if they go 11-2 and let's say they get beat 31-24 against Georgia in the title game? What happens in that scenario? By the way, because of what I'm talking about, and I'm guaranteeing you Nick Saban knows it, they're going to dismantle Auburn next weekend. Dismantle. I'm expecting a lot of points. Bryce Young is going to win the Heisman, come hell, come high water, I think. And part of that's going to be the Auburn game. So it is what it is. With that being stated, the last couple weekends of college football, got rivalry week, and then we've got the conference championship game weekend. Should be a lot of fun. I don't have any idea what to expect in terms of some random upset. I'm just picking Ohio State's going to beat Michigan. Alabama's going to beat Auburn. Georgia's going to murder Georgia Tech. Notre Dame will beat Stanford. And I think Oklahoma State's going to win, but it's going to be close. I think they're going to win like 38-31. I'd like to see them win by more because I think it'd be cool to have somebody different in the college football playoff. I don't think it matters whether it's Oklahoma State, Notre Dame, Alabama, whatever. None of them are going to beat Georgia anyway, but it'd be somebody different. So with that being stated, curious to hear your comments and opinions. It's going to be an interesting playoff scenario again this year. We'll have at least one new team with Cincinnati, barring something completely unforeseen. So everybody have a great day, and thank you much.